I'm Angela, 28F, and I've been married to Thomas, 30M, for 3 years now. To give you some background, I grew up in a small town in the Midwest. My parents, both teachers, raised me and my 2 siblings with strong values of hard work and education. Despite our modest means, they always encouraged us to dream big. I was the first in my family to go to college, working part-time jobs to help pay for my education. I met Thomas during my senior year of college. He was in grad school, studying business. We hit it off immediately, bonding over our shared love of classic movies and hiking. Thomas came from a more affluent background, but he never made me feel less than. If anything, he admired my drive and determination. When I first met Thomas's family, his father Mark, 62M, seemed like the nicest person. He welcomed me with open arms and always made sure I felt comfortable during family gatherings. Mark was a successful businessman who had built his company from the ground up. He often told stories about his humble beginnings and how he worked his way to success, which made me feel like we had something in common. Thomas and I got engaged after dating for 2 years. It was a romantic proposal during a hike to our favorite spot overlooking the city. Mark was the first to congratulate us and even offer to help plan the wedding. He took an active role in the preparations, helping us choose venues and catering options. I remember feeling overwhelmed by the cost of everything, but Mark insisted on covering most of the expenses, saying he wanted us to have the wedding of our dreams. Throughout our first year of marriage, Mark continued to be incredibly kind. He'd invite us over for Sunday dinners, include me in family vacations, and even taught me how to make his famous apple pie. I really felt like I had gained not just a father-in-law, but a second dad. He would often ask about my job at a local nonprofit, seeming genuinely interested in my work with underprivileged youth. Last month, Mark called me out of the blue. He asked if I'd like to accompany him to his golf club's annual charity event. He explained that his usual partner, Thomas's mom, they're divorced, couldn't make it this year due to a scheduling conflict with her yoga retreat. I was touched that he thought of me and immediately agreed. I had never been to his golf club before, and I was excited to see this part of his life. The day of the event arrived, and I was excited. I put on my best outfit, a navy blue dress I had bought for a work function, paired with some pearl earrings Thomas had given me for our anniversary. I met Mark at the club, feeling a bit nervous but mostly thrilled to be included. As soon as we entered, he excused himself to greet some friends. I didn't think much of it and went to get a drink at the bar. The bartender gave me a somewhat odd look when I ordered a simple gin and tonic, but I brushed it off. After about 30 minutes, I started feeling a bit out of place. The room was filled with people in designer clothes, discussing vacation homes and stock portfolios. I couldn't see Mark anywhere, so I decided to find a seat. The event was starting soon, and most guests were already seated. As I scanned the room, I spotted Mark at a table with some other people. I walked over, assuming he'd saved me a seat. But when I approached, he barely acknowledged me. He mumbled a quick hello and turned back to his conversation. I stood there awkwardly for a moment before finding an empty seat at another table. The women at my table were polite but didn't engage me in conversation beyond basic pleasantries. Throughout the entire event, Mark barely spoke to me. He mingled with other guests during breaks but always seemed to be looking past me when I tried to join the conversation. I felt incredibly confused and hurt. This wasn't the warm, welcoming Mark I knew, the man who had spent hours teaching me to perfect his apple pie crust or who had laughed with me over funny stories about Thomas's childhood. After the event, I waited by Mark's car as we had agreed. He finally showed up after what felt like ages, engrossed in conversation with a man I didn't recognize. On the drive home, I tried to make conversation, asking about the charity and his friends. His responses were short and disinterested. I mentioned how much money had been raised for the local children's hospital, thinking he'd be excited about the cause, but he just nodded absently. I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. When we got to my house, I decided to ask him directly if everything was okay. He gave me a strange look and said, "Everything's fine." Why wouldn't it be? Then he drove off before I could say anything else, leaving me standing in my driveway, confused and hurt. I spent the next few days replaying the event in my mind. I was sure I hadn't imagined Mark's cold behavior. It was so unlike him. I thought about all the times he had welcomed me into his home, how he had helped me surprise Thomas with a homemade birthday cake last year, how he had always treated me like family. What had changed? I decided to talk to Thomas about it, but he suggested I might be overthinking things. He said his dad probably just got caught up with old friends. Thomas had always been a bit oblivious to social nuances, so I wasn't entirely surprised by his reaction. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The next time we visited Mark's house for dinner, I noticed he was acting differently towards me. He wasn't outright rude, but there was a definite change in his demeanor. He didn't ask about my work or hobbies like he usually did. Instead, he focused all his attention on Thomas, asking about his job and some clients he was working with. When I tried to join the conversation, Mark would politely acknowledge me before turning back to Thomas. I thought about the many dinners we'd had here before, how Mark would always insist I try his new recipes or ask for my opinion on his latest home improvement project. Now, it felt like I was invisible. The warmth that had made me feel so welcome in this house seemed to have vanished. After dinner, I asked Mark if we could talk privately. Thomas looked concerned but didn't object. Once we were alone in Mark's study, a room where he had once proudly shown me his collection of first edition books, I asked Mark directly why he had been treating me differently. I mentioned the charity event and how hurt I felt by his behavior. Mark's response left me speechless. He said, "Angela, you're a lovely girl, but you have to understand that there are certain circles where your background might not be fully appreciated." I thought it would be easier for everyone if I didn't draw attention to our relationship at the club. I was stunned. Mark knew I came from a working-class family, but he had never seemed to care before. I had worked hard to put myself through college and build a successful career. How could he suddenly be ashamed of me? I thought about all the times he had praised my work ethic, how he had told Thomas he was lucky to have found someone so grounded and genuine. I told Mark how deeply his words had hurt me. I reminded him of all the times he had welcomed me into the family, of how he had treated me like a daughter. I asked if all of that had been fake. Was I just a charity case to him, someone he could feel good about helping until it became inconvenient? Mark tried to backtrack, saying he did care for me but that his social standing was important too. He said he was trying to protect me from potential judgment. But his words only made me feel worse. I didn't need protection, I needed respect. I left his house that night feeling betrayed and angry. The drive home was silent, with Thomas attempting to make conversation but quickly giving up when he realized I wasn't in the mood to talk. When we got home, I told Thomas what his father had said. He was upset, but he seemed torn between supporting me and not wanting to believe his dad could be so shallow. Now I'm not sure what to do. I've always valued my relationship with Mark, but I don't know if I can move past this. Every time I think about it, I remember all the moments I thought we were bonding, cooking together, working on his garden, looking through old family photo albums. Were those moments real, or was I just fooling myself? Am I overreacting? Should I try to understand his perspective? Or should I distance myself from him to protect my own self-respect? I could really use some outside opinions on this. How do I navigate this situation without completely destroying my relationship with my husband's family? Update 1. It's been about a month since my last post, and I wanted to give you all an update on the situation with my father-in-law, Mark. First, I want to thank everyone for their supportive comments and advice. Reading through them helped me gain perspective and gave me the courage to address this issue head-on. After my initial post, I spent a lot of time reflecting on my relationship with Mark and discussing the situation with Thomas. Thomas was initially reluctant to confront his father, which led to some tense moments between us. He kept saying things like, "That's just how Dad is sometimes," or "Maybe you misunderstood him." It was frustrating because I felt like he wasn't taking my feelings seriously. However, after several long conversations, he began to understand how deeply Mark's actions had hurt me. I shared with Thomas some stories from my childhood, about how hard my parents worked to make ends meet, and how proud I was of where I came from. I think this helped him see why Mark's words had cut so deep. We decided to invite Mark over to our house for dinner to discuss the issue. I was nervous, but I knew it was necessary to clear the air. I spent the whole day preparing Mark's favorite meal, pot roast with roasted vegetables, the recipe he had taught me during one of our cooking sessions. I thought it might help set a positive tone for the conversation. The dinner started off awkwardly, with everyone tiptoeing around the elephant in the room. Mark complimented the food, and for a moment, it felt like old times. But then I caught him giving Thomas a questioning look, and I knew we couldn't avoid the topic any longer. Finally, I took a deep breath and broached the subject. I explained to Mark how his behavior at the charity event and his subsequent comments had made me feel. I told him about the pain of feeling accepted and then suddenly excluded, and how his words about my background had shaken my confidence in our relationship. I reminded him of all the times he had made me feel like part of the family, teaching me to make apple pie, helping me plan surprises for Thomas, showing me his prized book collection. I asked him if any of that had been real. Mark listened quietly, his expression unreadable. When I finished speaking, he was silent for a long moment. Then, to my surprise, he apologized. He admitted that he had let his concerns about social status override his genuine affection for me. He explained that some of his old friends had made comments about Thomas marrying someone from a different social circle, and he had foolishly tried to manage their perceptions instead of standing up for me. He told us about his own father, who had always been obsessed with social climbing and had instilled those values in him from a young age. Mark said he thought he had moved past that mentality, but realized now that some of those old habits were still ingrained. He shared a story about how his father had once forbidden him from bringing his best friend to a family event because the friend's father was a janitor. Mark said he had vowed never to be like that, and he was ashamed that he had fallen into the same pattern. Mark's openness caught me off guard. I had been prepared for defensiveness or denial, not this level of self-reflection. He asked for my forgiveness and promised to do better in the future. He even suggested that we all attend the next club event together, where he would proudly introduce me as his daughter-in-law. Thomas, who had been quiet throughout most of the conversation, finally spoke up. He told his father how disappointed he had been to learn about his behavior, but that he was proud of him for owning up to his mistakes. It was a powerful moment between father and son. While I appreciated Mark's apology, I told him that rebuilding trust would take time. I explained that his actions had brought up some of my own insecurities about fitting into their family, and that those feelings wouldn't disappear overnight. Mark seemed to understand and promised to be patient. As the evening wound down, there was a sense of cautious optimism in the air. We had taken the first step towards healing, but I knew we still had a long way to go. Mark suggested we start having weekly family dinners again, to which Thomas and I agreed. Since that night, things have been slowly improving. Mark has been making a visible effort to include me in family activities and conversations. He's asked me about my work and my family more in the past month than he had in the previous year. Last week, he even asked me to teach him how to make my mom's famous lasagna recipe, saying he wanted to learn more about my family's traditions. However, I'm still wary. While I want to believe that Mark has had a genuine change of heart, a part of me is afraid that he might revert to his old behavior in certain social situations. I'm trying to keep an open mind while also protecting myself emotionally. Thomas has been incredibly supportive throughout this process. He's made it clear to his father that any future disrespect towards me won't be tolerated. Seeing him stand up for me has strengthened our relationship and helped me feel more secure in our marriage. As for me, I'm working on rebuilding my self-confidence. Mark's words had shaken me more than I initially realized, making me question my place not just in the family, but in our wider social circle. I've started seeing a career coach to help me recognize and celebrate my own achievements, regardless of my background. We haven't attended any events at Mark's club yet, but he's mentioned an upcoming dinner that he'd like us all to attend together. I'm nervous about it, but I think it will be a good test of how much things have really changed. I'll keep you all updated on how things progress. Thank you again for all your support and advice. It's been invaluable in navigating this difficult situation. Update 2. Hello everyone. It's been about 3 months since my last update, and a lot has happened. I wanted to share the latest developments with you all. Remember the club dinner I mentioned in my last update? Well, we attended it last month, and it turned out to be quite an eye-opening experience. Mark stayed true to his word and proudly introduced me to everyone as his daughter-in-law. He even went out of his way to mention my recent promotion at work and some volunteer projects I've been involved with. The dinner was held in the club's main dining room, a grand space with chandeliers and oil paintings on the walls. As we entered, I felt a bit out of place, but Mark put his hand on my shoulder and gave me an encouraging smile. It helped calm my nerves. At first, everything seemed to be going well. Most of Mark's friends were polite, if a bit reserved. We were seated at a large round table with 3 other couples. The conversation flowed easily as we discussed current events and local news. However, as the evening progressed, I began to notice some underhanded comments and judgmental looks. One woman, Vivian, asked me if I found it difficult to adjust to our lifestyle, emphasizing the R in a way that clearly excluded me. Another man, Robert, made a joke about my hometown that, while not overtly offensive, carried a clear air of condescension. I was hurt, but I tried to maintain my composure. I thought about leaving early, but then I remembered all the times I had faced challenges in my life and overcome them. I wasn't about to let a few snide comments drive me away. What really surprised me was Mark's reaction. Instead of ignoring these comments as he had in the past, he actually spoke up. When Vivian made her comment about adjusting, Mark jumped in to talk about how I had actually introduced the family to several new experiences and perspectives. He mentioned the community service project I had gotten him involved in, and how it had opened his eyes to issues he had never considered before. And after Robert's joke, Mark pointedly changed the subject to my recent accomplishments at work. He talked about how proud he was of my promotion and the impact my nonprofit was having on the community. I could see Robert squirming a bit, clearly not expecting this response. On the drive home, Mark apologized for his friend's behavior. He admitted that he had never really noticed how judgmental they could be until he started paying attention. He said he was embarrassed that he had ever cared what people like that thought. This incident seemed to be a turning point for Mark. Over the next few weeks, he became even more supportive and inclusive. He started asking me to teach him about my family's traditions and even suggested we host a dinner featuring some dishes from my cultural background. We had that dinner last week, and it was a beautiful event. I taught Mark how to make my grandmother's pierogi recipe, and we spent an afternoon in the kitchen together, laughing and sharing stories. During the dinner, Mark proudly told everyone how he had learned to make the dish, and how it had given him a new appreciation for my family's history. However, just as things were looking up with Mark, a new issue arose with Thomas. He started to become uncomfortable with how much time I was spending with his father. He made comments about how I seemed to care more about impressing Mark than spending time with him. This led to several arguments between us. I tried to explain to Thomas that I was just trying to rebuild the relationship with his father, but he seemed to feel left out. It became clear that while we had been so focused on my relationship with Mark, we had neglected our own relationship. This realization led to some deep conversations between Thomas and me. We talked about our expectations for family relationships, our individual insecurities, and how we could better support each other. Thomas admitted that he felt a bit jealous of the new bond I was forming with his father, especially given their own somewhat complicated relationship. He shared some stories from his childhood, times when he had felt that Mark's expectations were too high or when he had struggled to live up to his father's success. We agreed to set aside more one-on-one time for just the two of us, separate from family obligations. We've started having weekly date nights where we try new restaurants or activities in our city. Last week, we took a cooking class together, which was both hilarious and fun. It's been nice to reconnect and remember why we fell in love in the first place. As for Mark, he's continued to make efforts to be more inclusive and understanding. He's even started to distance himself from some of his more judgmental friends, saying he no longer enjoys their company as much. Last month, he surprised us by volunteering at the youth center where I work. He spent a Saturday helping us repaint the community room, and I could see how much it meant to the kids to have someone like him take an interest in their lives. While things aren't perfect, they're definitely improving. I feel more accepted in the family now than I ever have before. However, I'm also more aware of the complexities of family dynamics and the work it takes to maintain healthy relationships. I'm cautiously optimistic about the future. We're planning a family vacation next month, the first one where I've been involved in all the planning from the start. We're going to rent a cabin by a lake, a compromise between Thomas's love of fishing and my preference for hiking. Mark has been enthusiastic about the idea, even suggesting we make it an annual tradition. Thank you all for your continued support throughout this journey. Your advice and encouragement have been incredibly helpful. I'll update you again if there are any significant developments. Update 3. Hello everyone. It's been about 6 months since my last update, and I wanted to share some final thoughts on this whole situation. The family vacation I mentioned in my last update turned out to be a pivotal moment for all of us. We spent a week at a cabin by Lake Michigan, and it was the first time I truly felt like an equal part of the family. Mark went out of his way to make sure I was comfortable and included in all the activities. He even asked me to teach everyone how to make my grandmother's famous paella recipe, which we cooked over an open fire one night. The vacation wasn't without its challenges. There was a tense moment when Mark invited some old friends who were vacationing nearby to join us for dinner. I was worried about how they might treat me, but to my surprise, Mark took charge of the situation. Before they arrived, he pulled me aside and assured me that if anyone made me feel uncomfortable, he would ask them to leave. It turned out not to be necessary. The evening went smoothly, and I even ended up exchanging contact information with one of the wives who shared my interest in gardening. Thomas and I used this time to reconnect and strengthen our relationship. We had long walks on the beach, talking about our future and how we wanted to shape our family dynamics going forward. It was during one of these walks that Thomas apologized for his earlier jealousy and admitted that he had been struggling with his own insecurities about his relationship with his father. We talked about ways to balance our individual relationships with Mark while still prioritizing our marriage. Since the vacation, things have settled into a new normal. Mark has become one of my strongest advocates. He's introduced me to several professional contacts who have been helpful in my career. More importantly, he's made a consistent effort to understand and appreciate my background. Last month, he surprised me by visiting my parents' house for the first time. He spent the afternoon helping my dad fix up his old truck, and I could see how much it meant to my parents to be welcomed by him. Thomas and I have grown closer through this experience. We've learned the importance of open communication and supporting each other through family challenges. We've also started to create our own family traditions, blending elements from both our backgrounds. For Thanksgiving this year, We're planning to combine dishes from both our families' recipes. As for Mark's social circle, there have been some changes there too. He's naturally drifted away from his more judgmental friends and has started to form new friendships with people who share his evolving values. He even joined the local community service group that I volunteer with, saying he wants to broaden his perspectives. Looking back, I'm amazed at how much has changed since my original post. What started as a painful experience of exclusion has led to personal growth for all of us. I've learned to stand up for myself and assert my place in the family. Thomas has learned to navigate the complex dynamics between his wife and his father. And Mark has confronted his own biases and worked to become a more open-minded and inclusive person. I won't say that everything is perfect. We still have occasional misunderstandings or moments of tension. Last week, there was a small disagreement about where to host the next family gathering, but we were able to talk it through calmly and find a compromise. It's a reminder that maintaining good relationships requires ongoing effort and communication. This whole experience has taught me that family relationships are complex and ever-evolving. It's not always easy, but it's definitely worth it. I'm grateful for how things have turned out and excited for what the future holds for our family. Thank you all for your support throughout this journey. Your advice and encouragement have been invaluable. While I don't foresee any major updates in the future, know that your kindness has made a real difference in my life.